Hello, and thank you for watching this demo of DALBAR's Investor Panic Relief Tool. My name is Corey Clark, Chief Marketing Officer of DALBAR Inc. For the next few minutes, I'd like to take you through the tool so that you can see how it works and to demonstrate some of the major variables that can be tweaked to accommodate various scenarios. Just in the way of background, this tool is meant to present a hypothetical which would show the investor how they would fare under various market scenarios should they purchase portfolio insurance through an index put. So here's the tool. We start off by providing some basic information regarding the person who is preparing this and the person for whom it is prepared. And so in this case, we have myself as the hypothetical advisor and Charlie Client as the hypothetical investor. And in this hypothetical, I'd like to have it be a situation where a client had a $100,000 portfolio and experienced a 10% loss, which has induced the panic, which has brought them to you seeking to liquidate their portfolio. So in this case, we have a $90,000 current portfolio. I'm going to calculate right away, and we give the user the option of doing that and put some of the factors below because from a usability standpoint, it's much easier to start with a template and tweak some of the variables that are necessary rather than starting from scratch. So in this case, we defaulted to the S&P 500 mini index. It is recommending the purchase of 4 contracts, which would be a total cost of $1,866. We're going to see some representations of how the purchase of that contract would affect the overall value of the investor's portfolio under various conditions. In this graph, we look at 3 major conditions. The table beneath it will look a little bit deeper into that. But first, the graph. All the way to the left, we have the $90,000 that the investor would have if he or she withdrew right now, and of course that wouldn't change. If the market did decline and they did purchase the put, and the market declined 20%, their value would go from $90,000 to $94,816 by virtue of $22,816 in proceeds from the put option. And on the flip side of that, if the market rose 20%, the value of the portfolio would increase from $90,000 to $106,134, and that includes the cost, the premium, so to speak, that was paid. That's the $1,866 that the investor paid for the 4 put contracts. In this table, we look at the same 20% loss scenario and 20% gain scenario, but we go a little bit deeper as to different scenarios in between. And we also take a look at how the ending portfolio value would be affected without the index put, and that's the first 2 columns, with the index put, which is the next 2 columns, and then the advantage that the investor receives for purchasing the index put. Some things that are important to show here is that at any point, if the market rises, then the contract will expire and be worthless. So that is the premium that's non-recoverable, and it's represented here in the $1,866. So if the market goes up while purchasing the insurance, the worst that the investor will do is they'll be out the premium that they paid. However, if the market goes down, you can see by quite a bit as the market goes down more and more, the advantage starts to grow. Just give a few more seconds to sort of look at this table to digest what is in it. But what I'd like to do next is tweak a few variables, because this is just sort of a template that we started with, In many cases, the investor is going to have individual circumstances that are going to require some of these factors to be changed. The first one I would like to bring to your attention is the index itself. So again, in this case, we defaulted to the S&P 500 mini index. But let's assume that the client had a more small cap oriented portfolio and more tech stock portfolio. If we come down here, this is where we can change many of the factors. The first is the index that's used. And we have quite a few that are pre-populated in the drop-down menu. But I think it's important to note that you can also choose your own and enter your own strike price as well. But for the purposes of this, let's go back to the hypothetical I mentioned with the investor with small cap or tech stocks. It may be that the best index for them to be hedging against would be maybe the NASDAQ. So in this case, if we change that and recalculate, we see a more volatile asset class is going to cost a little bit more money. So you can see that in this case, it'll be the insurance policy, essentially. The premium would be $2,481. And you see greater proceeds here if the market were to go down by 20%. And actually ends up in this scenario, giving this contract a little bit better in both of these scenarios of losing 20% or gaining 20%. And all of the values are adjusted here. You can see the premium is a little bit higher, so now represents 2.8% rather than 2.1%, but that still represents the floor of the worst that the investor can do. Their losses are capped at the premium. Another scenario I'd like to demonstrate is one in which perhaps the investor does not need quite as much protection. They're willing to sacrifice less downside protection for a smaller premium. So we're going to revert back to the S&P 500 and our premium of $1,866. And there's a few ways that we could decrease the amount of protection. We could decrease the current portfolio value that we're protecting. And of course, then all of these outcomes and graphical representations would be based off of that portion of the portfolio. But if we want to keep the portfolio the same, I would argue that the best way of doing this would be to decrease the number of contracts. So the buy order that was recommended here, or that's displayed, is 4 contracts. And that is to arrive, to cover the portfolio value in question. If we come down to these factors here, we have the opportunity to change any of these 6 factors. We keep the normal factors here, and they'll always be listed and displayed here so that the user never loses sight of what the original or normal values are. And as you can see here, the values that we use were unchanged. So they're all identical to the normal values. But if we were to change the number of contracts down from 4 contracts to 3 contracts, we're going to spend less money. And so let's see how that affects it. Again, right now, the 4 contracts was $1,866. If we bring that down to 3 contracts, the premium goes down to $1,403. So now from 2.1% to 1.6%, the losses are now capped at an even lower amount in this case. The most that they will lose in this case is 1.6%. However, the downside protection is a lot less. So now in situations where the portfolio loses, you can see that they are protected. They're losing a whole lot less, but not gaining, whereas in the last example, with a 20% loss, there was an actual gain being made by the investor. So this is a way of getting less downside protection for less of a premium. And of course, we could bring that down even more. We're only a $941 premium. But you can see now that the losses are not capped at that amount. The premium is 1%, and if the portfolio did lose 20%, then the client would still lose 7.3%. So a good amount of downside protection, but not quite as much. But on the flip side, obviously, in a situation where the market is up, they would participate in that full upswing and only have paid that 1% premium, the $941. So it's just a matter of degree. The opposite is true. We could bump it up from 4 contracts to 5 contracts, and we see the opposite effect. Now the premium is higher. The losses are capped at a lower amount, so the investor could lose, in this case, $2,323 max. But as you can see, when the market does go down, there's a much larger gain. The investor actually stands to gain quite a bit when the market goes down in that case, but paying a larger premium. One other thing I'd like to show is how we can augment this table. Perhaps we don't want to look at such a wide band of outcomes from negative 20% to a 20% gain. Perhaps we want to only look at it within plus or minus 7.5%. We can change that and recalculate. And you can see that this table will now look at plus or minus 7.5%, dividing it in half until it gets into the origin here at 0%. So same thing with the graph here. Now it's showing if the market were to decline 7.5% and if the market were to rise 7.5%. So you can control what is displayed here in the outcomes table as well. The last 2 things that I'd like to show you are first the feedback button, because we will be inviting folks who are watching this demo to access the free beta version of the tool. And so we urge you to give feedback. We very much want to learn every way that we could make the tool more helpful, more understandable. And so we have a feedback button down here at the bottom. I believe there's one up here. Yep, one up here at the top as well. And last would be the creation of the PDF. I alluded to this at the very beginning, that there is an artifact that can be created to either be displayed to the client or to go into the client's file. For the most part, it's the same graphical and tabular representation that you saw in the tool itself. But now you have a chance to save it to your desktop or to print it out, wherever it is that you choose. It's just a 2-page artifact. So once again, I'd like to extend this invitation to everybody who is listening to this demonstration to join our IPRT beta test. You can see the URL right here on your screen. It is secure.dalbar.com/IPRT/. Again, we very much encourage you to give it a shot and provide us with any feedback that you have, see how you can use it in your practice. Of course, any way that we can mitigate some of the fear and prevent a panicked investor from withdrawing their funds, then we will certainly be doing a good thing for the advisors and for that investor. So thank you very much for viewing this demo. Have a great day.